Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Bush League Huddle Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Nak, and you've got my fellow co-stars or co-hosts, Fab and Raj. We have a great episode for you guys today. We're going to be diving into some good 2QB strategies for draft season as it's fast approaching. Excuse me. Definitely in full swing nowadays. There's drafts being done every single day, and we'll continue to do so for the following week. We have football, real football, in 9 short days, ladies and gentlemen. We are
Amazing.
stoked. This is just crazy. Preseason is in the rear view. Training camps have come to an end. It was actually NFL cutdown day, roster cutdown day to the 53-man rosters today. So we had a few little surprises there. Um, but before we dive into our episode, we want to just thank our 17 guests that came on and helped us out with our division previews the last 8 weeks. Really big thanks. It was a lot of fun doing that with you guys. Definitely going to have a few of you or all of you back at some point this year. But big thank you for that. Um, yeah, round of applause. Really, seriously, let's get that round of applause going.
Big shout
Also,
out.
guys, we've mentioned it before, but we have a listener survivor pool going on. So $20 entry, uh, regular survivor rules. We'll go through them. We'll probably post some rules later on this week. So I'm not going to dive into much of that. But $20 entry, winner take all kind of deal. Uh, we'll post some details this week on our social media, and I think deadline will be most likely next Tuesday or Wednesday
Yeah,
before the
September
season
4th.
starts. Yeah,
September 4th. Yeah.
September 4th will be the deadline for that. So yeah, what do you guys think of the basically the deadline today for the rosters? Anything that caught your eye?
I'm really sad for Kadarius Toney.
A lot of Giants, a lot of ex-Giants got cut.
A lot of
Tony,
It's
ex-Giants got
true.
cut.
Sterling Sharp as well.
Yeah,
Like
Shepard,
yeah. Sterling Shepard
Sterling
got cut.
Shepard.
Sterling Shepard, Hodges. That one was
Hodgins. Yeah,
Hodgins. That was a surprising one, I
Yeah.
thought.
yeah, yeah. I was surprised about that too. He was a really good depth guy, but I guess the wide receiver room, for lack of a better word, is pretty. I don't want to say stacked, but it's full, and there is some quality there with Jalen Hyatt and Wandell Robinson, and obviously Malik Neighbors. And
The
there's Darius Slayton too, right? So
I think did Tim Patrick that finally happened, right? The Tim
yeah,
Patrick,
Yeah,
or is he still?
he
Or are they
already.
trying?
No, he was released and he actually was signed just before to the Lions practice squad. But
Okay.
they were
yeah.
saying that that's just a formality because the Lions kept only 4 wide receivers on the roster, so they're probably going to elevate him for week one right away.
Yeah, because they just cut Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yep.
Patrick had a really good year like 2 or 3 years ago. He's been hurt the last 2 years. Like I think he's a really good player. So if he
Yeah, I
gets a
think
good opportunity, like it'd be really
But
nice for
he's
him to.
also 30, right? So I think he's going
really.
to be. Yeah, I was
Wow.
surprised too. I looked it up because I was like, this guy's been around a little bit. He's. I think he just turned 30, or he's turning 31. But yeah, I think it's going to be a very good depth move for Detroit because after they got rid of, the name is escaping me there, but
Josh Reynolds.
Josh Reynolds, he's going to slide into that spot perfectly because you never really know with what's his name there, Jameson, if he's going to
Jameson
be.
Williams season, baby.
Yeah,
It's
Raj.
happening.
I hope
Raj is
so.
a big Jameson Williams.
It's
I hope
happening.
so.
It's happening for sure. Like
I
there's
mean,
just the fact they didn't draft anyone, the fact that they didn't really sign anyone major in free agency. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to have a breakout year per se, but he's going to have the opportunity for sure.
Yeah,
He's
I
definitely going to have the opportunity. So
he
it's really on him. Like he's healthy, no weird gambling issues,
He had
yeah,
a
no
really nice
suspensions.
no
highlight reel
suspension.
catch. He had a really nice highlight reel catch in practice, so you know he's about to break out.
In
We're talking about
practice.
practice,
Talking
man.
about practice, man.
Not a game. Not a game that I love.
There
We're
was
talking about practice.
also a couple of notable backup running backs that went on IR prior to deadline. So basically, if you go on IR prior to going on the 53-man roster, you're gone for the year. There's no like coming back. So right before there was Dylan, who's gone for the year. So that opens up a lot for Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Elijah Mitchell also went on season-ending IR, so
Oh
that
my
opens up the
god.
door
I
for
did not hear that.
Jason Mason.
Oh my god. Jordan
Yeah,
Mason.
Jordan, excuse me,
Yeah.
Jordan Mason. Yeah, Elijah Mitchell, man, that guy really cannot catch any break at all. Like,
Well,
just
maybe he
Just
catches too
injuries.
many of them.
yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it for sure.
Sorry. I hope maybe
Another
he can be a high
another
finisher.
guy, surprisingly got cut. Noah Brown. That's a nice guy
Yeah,
who's on the market right now. I know, Rod, you were talking about. You mentioned the Cowboys being a really good fit. They need wide receiver help, and he obviously played for
Yeah.
the Cowboys as well.
yeah, it
So
makes sense.
it's
Speaking of the Cowboys, CD Lamb,
Huge
broke the
news, finally.
about
bank.
time.
Yeah, I don't know what was so hard about that deal. I was watching McAfee today, and I was listening to Lambo, and he was saying it. He was like what took so like that deal should have been done 3 weeks ago with ease.
What was the purpose of this?
Like,
Yeah,
well,
Like,
yeah,
there's no
exactly.
purpose of it.
What was the like? Then you could have had him at camp. He could have been, in shape. He could have been like, look, I don't think it's going to hamper him too much. Like, he'll be ready to rock and roll in week one. He might not have a full. He might not be on the field 100% of the snaps, but I think when he's on the field, he's going to be rock and roll. But I mean, you lost all that training camp time for really no reason.
So I think it's going to go back to, if he has a bad season, people are going to mention this for sure.
Of course,
It's
Yeah.
because
going to be
that's
the
easy excuse.
main excuse of, like, he had a bad season. He wasn't there for camp. We saw with Josh Jacobs. I think Jacobs was like around the same time, 2 weeks before the season opener, or maybe a week before the season
I think it was a week
opener.
before. It was
Yeah,
very close to the season starting.
exactly. And like, I looked at some history of players who held out recently, even like like over the past few years, like at the wide receiver position. And like, it's up and down, like who actually has a good year or not. Keenan Allen, I think, believe held out, maybe had to hold in, but he had a really good season last year. They reference like Terrell Owens when he held out with the Eagles. He had like probably his worst year, and that was when he started doing the going downhill, and obviously age caught up with him. DeAndre Hopkins was one who had a relatively good year, not typically what he usually does. So it feels like it's like 50-50 how players fare if they miss training camp. It might depend on position too. I could see maybe running backs being a bigger issue, and maybe wide receivers. But it'll be interesting to see. For me, it's not going to stop me from drafting him personally.
He's
But
he's still he's 25 years old.
exactly,
Yeah.
I think at 25 years old, it'd be different if he was 31.
yeah.
We'd be talking maybe a little bit differently and maybe dropping him down a peg or two. But right now, I'm not staying away from CeeDee Lamb
Yeah,
because he missed training camp at 25 years old.
you're not
This
taking
was
him anyway
close.
at first overall. You're taking Josh Allen. Let's be real. I don't care
Well,
what your I
I
don't care what
guess
your mock, I don't care what your
I
mock
guess
draft said.
I guess
I knew you were doing that. I knew you were doing it on
I
purpose.
guess you'll see next Thursday or
Fugaze.
next Tuesday, excuse me, a week from today. A week from today. Very excited. Our draft is coming up, and
Can't wait.
yeah, it's draft season, boys. This is the
Indeed.
best. This is the best time of the year.
How many leagues are you guys in?
I'm in 3. I have a draft on Thursday. Rod, you and I had a draft
I have a draft
on
Thursday too.
Sunday. We
Yeah,
had one on Sunday.
yeah.
I
Fab's
think it's
very
safe
happy
to say.
about
I
his
I feel
think
team.
like
it's
I'd say,
Rod,
safe
you're
to
don't
in
know
say
like
we
why.
five of
killed
them. I
it.
think you're in like five of them, Rod.
I'm in
Let's go.
I'm in 5
Wow,
leagues,
you are in five.
and I'm also in 2 survivors.
It's true. You're right. I'm in three survivors if I count all of them. If I count ours, we're here,
Yeah,
and we have one with the boys, and then I have one on the side with my other with some other friends as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, three fantasy leagues. One is an office league, so you could, those ones are kind of whatever. You don't really.
yeah. I
Hey,
have mine
hey,
on
be
Thursday.
careful,
My draft.
man. So if you're, I know some of your colleagues listen.
I tell them that on a daily basis. Let them listen to this. Shout out to my colleagues. Chani, you broke the league already. Anyways, well, nice segue into
Well, actually, I gotta cut you off. There is some other news about Jamar Chase, how he's been practicing the last
Mm.
2 weeks,
oh yeah, he
and
showed
there's
up to practice.
confirmation. And there's
No, just today.
confirmation there's gonna play week 1 as well. Like there was a lot of. I got the notification earlier this evening actually that the head coach came out and said that like he's fully expected to play week 1. There's no issue at all,
Yeah,
and he's been practicing despite his hold in,
He
even
did it
though
the
he
right
still
way,
has
man.
2
I
years
like the
left in
way
his
he did
contract.
it.
yeah, but you
But
know what?
it's
I disagree with that because he's only played 3 years. Like I know you're eligible for the extension, but like look at Jefferson. Jefferson played all 5 years before he got paid. C. Lamb was going into his fifth year before he got paid. Ayuk This is his 5th year before he's clamoring to get paid. Like Jamar Chase, I know you're good. I know you're eligible to do it, but
This is
you only
strategy
played
for
3
next
years.
year. This is strategy for next year. These
And you
guys
know
are playing
what?
the
And
long
it's
game.
the only people it hurts really is the Bengals, because they're dumb. Now they got to pay him more than CeeDee Lamb. They got to pay him Jefferson money, and if they wait till next year, it's going to be over Jefferson. It's going to be 36 or 37. So they
Notoriously
have
cheap, man.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Very
They're
cheap, very
notoriously
cheap.
cheap. But then, yeah, but the owner said, he's like, I'm not signing him this year. Like, there's no need. He's played
Mhm.
3 years with us. He's had an injury. Like, there's really no need. But yeah, he's definitely playing. There's no way he's not going to. Okay, so let's dive into some draft strategies. As I mentioned, it is draft season, so there's drafts underway. So we're going to dive into 3 different strategies in 2QB leagues, or I guess SuperFlex as well. Kind of similar strategies here, but we're going to really dive into the 2QB. So the different types of strategies that we have would be the heavy QB strategy. So that would mean basically picking 2 QBs in the first 3 rounds, solidifying the most important position, let's say, and then rounding out your depth as you go along. If not, there's a strategy of hero QB. So you're picking a QB in round 1. So that pretty much assures you a top guy, a top 5 or top 10 QB, and then you're not investing in QB until much later, closer to, let's say, the 5th or 6th round. Again, that's going to depend on the board, which we'll talk about later. And then there's the late strategy QB, where you're stocking up on running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, whatnot, and then diving into QB a little bit later. So with that being said, we'll dive into our first strategy here. Again, each strategy is going to have its pros and cons, and there's no way you could just take a strategy and follow it to a T. The draft board is ultimately going to decide how you're going to pivot and go into a different direction with strategy, with whoever's being picked, right? So every draft is different, so it'll never be the same. But this will give you kind of like a little bit of a cheat sheet going into your draft. So the first strategy we have here is the heavy QB strategy. So again, drafting 2 QBs in your first 3 picks. So somewhere along the lines of getting, I don't know, drafting a Mahomes and a Prescott Love, and then getting into like a Evans, Cooper Cup, or Debo in round 3. Or if not, you're drafting, let's say, Mahomes, then maybe going Olave, Harrison, Devontae in round 2, and then maybe grabbing like a Tua Golf Caleb in round 3. So again, this is going to obviously hamper your ability to grab some great running backs or wide receivers, because you're focusing in on QB, but you're also um, solidifying that QB position going forward. And in a 2 QB league, it's very important. So I ask you, Raj, is this something that you would focus on if you're drafting?
We did it. I did it in our, I believe, 2022 Bush League. I took Herbert and Brady back to back, and then I was able to get Devontae
Mm,
Adams and Nick Chubb. I am not a fan of it personally, because lately I am very much into having a lot of better depth at the wide receiver and running back position, but that's just me. If I were to do it, it'd probably be where I have an early pick. So like a top 3 pick, where I could go back to back QB, and then that third that third that third pick, I guess in the 3rd round, I'm at the turn. So I'm like early enough after I pick the second QB where I'm hoping that there's still some wide receiver depth that I could grab. Um, that's where I'm a bit struggle with it. And like, we're going to get to the other topics after, the other types of strategies after, but I have a hard time with, there's certain wide receivers, even running backs, I just don't want to have be my RB1s or RB2, WR1s or RB1s, which would lead me to move away from that heavy QB strategy personally.
Scott?
I've actually never done the heavy QB strategy, and I think my fantasy football record probably shows that, because I haven't won a championship in like 10 years. So maybe I might actually go towards this one going forward. Typically, I always do like, again, like further to Roger's point, a lot of it does depend on where you're drafting. If you're drafting higher up, you can get those top 4 or 5 guys. Like this year, if I'm drafting 6th and I have my 4 quarterbacks that I have highly ranked, and if one of those guys falls to me at 6, which I think is likely, then I'll be taking them in the first round, and then you just manage the rest of the draft accordingly. But it depends on who's going to be there for me in round 2 or round 3 for me to see that there is value there or not. But typically, I wouldn't go heavy QB strategy. It's just I really like rounding out my team as evenly as possible. But with that being said, like, listen, this year we've been talking a lot about zero RB strategy, because if you're taking a quarterback in the first round, you're probably not going to be getting McCaffrey. You're definitely not getting Brees Hall. You're not getting Bijan Robinson and all those guys, right? So if you want to spend second round or third round value on the Saquon Barkleys of the world, or on the Kyron Williams of the world that people are super hesitant on, then sure, go ahead. But you could also just wait until the later round and pick a running back, and then you'll be focusing on quarterbacks and wide receivers, which is also interesting too. Like Raj, in your draft that we did on Sunday, you went super heavy wide receiver, and you still landed Jordan Love in the third round.
Exactly.
Which is spectacular.
Well, and what I was going to say is a lot of those quarterbacks are bunched up together. So, like, let's say you do take like Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, and then you go ahead and take, like, you're not going to get LeBron Jackson. You'll probably get Jordan Love on the turn on the second round, maybe Brock Purdy, maybe Jared Goff. Obviously, Mahomes is Mahomes. I personally, I don't think he's ever going to get to that like 50 touchdown season, but I think he's absolutely amazing. But all those quarterbacks are all bunched up into the 380 to 360 fantasy points per year. So you're almost limiting yourself by going QB. And lately, I don't see it happen as much now, because there's a big, again, bunch up of that, like, kind of tier 2 type of QB together that you could probably get in the third round or fourth round. So it feels like a little bit of an antiquated strategy, the way I see it.
But if you're Lucas and you're listening, please go ahead and use the strategy, because we all know how much
quarterback. Or Guido, he's gonna roster 6 QBs.
Draft, he's gonna have like 6 quarterbacks. It's a 4-person bench, and 3 of them are going to be quarterbacks.
We have 5.
Sorry, 5.
We have 5-person bench, yeah. But honestly, I don't think I've ever done the heavy QB either. This strategy. I mean, look, at times it's going to work, for sure. It's definitely a strategy. They wouldn't have a strategy in place like this if it didn't work out. I think my personal say on it would be, yeah, if you're drafting in the top 3, usually 2 QB league, like, you're probably going QB, like, more often than not. I know there's exceptions, and there's people who don't like taking QBs, but usually you grab that beast QB. Now, when it comes to your turn, at the end of the first or beginning of the second, that's what you got to gauge. Like, if there's really a beast that falls to you, where it's like, oh my god, like, I got a gift now to take him, then you can go ahead and grab your QB, your other 2 QBs. Like, if you end up with a Josh Allen or Anthony Richardson, like, are you saying no to that combination just because you're going double QB? Like, I think the advantage of maybe potentially getting 30 and 40 points weeks from these guys is just, sometimes it makes or break you winning a week, right? And that's basically what you want. You want to win weeks. You want to get into the playoffs. But again, it's all going to depend also on, what does the run on wide receivers and running back look like, right? Like, if you take a QB first and then there's not a QB taken with the next 7 picks, well, you're going to have a lot of depth to choose from, and maybe you shy away and you change your heavy QB strategy.
That's a good point.
But if 7 or 10 QBs are taken after you've drafted at 1, 2, or 3, well, then you might be thinking, wow, okay, so if there are already that many taken, maybe I want to take one now that I have a back-to-back pick coming up, just to say, like, I won't see one for a while, and then who are you going to be stuck with, right?
Go ahead.
I'm a strong believer in going against the run. Whenever I see a run on a position, agreed. I do a U-turn and I go the opposite direction. If I see a run on quarterbacks happening, I do not take a quarterback.
Exactly.
I go right away for the highest position value of a wide receiver or running back, or if it's later on in the rounds, it might be even be a tight end. Typically, you see those tight end runs happening and that's when I don't dabble in that at all. I
Oh,
look for more like depth guys
so
for
much
my
depth.
for my on my bench or even like that's a good spot for actually QB2 if you're going to be drafting one QB earlier on, and then like later on in the draft there's a big run of tight ends. Like look and see what QBs are left, because Raj, to your point, you might get one of those guys that are bunched up in the middle going later on, and no one's thinking about them, right? So I typically go against common thought in that sense. When I see there's a run happening or something like that, I automatically pivot and look at other positions right away.
Yeah, because Knack, to your, I think you had two scenarios there where like it goes okay QB, then it's a run not on QBs. That's where you might want to pivot and say, well, man, I might able to get a Joe Burrow in the second round. I might be able to get an Anthony Richardson in the second round. So I think what you said early on is very factual. You can't really be stuck with one strategy. Like you could have
No, no, no.
you could have your
Exactly.
main strategy of who your first pick will be in the first round, and you absolutely have to pivot based off what's happening with the rest of the board. But
I think Knack, in your position, drafting first overall, what you might see has it, because you said Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson, right? You're obviously going to be drafting Josh Allen. Let's not
yeah,
sugarcoat this. Let's not play a smoke screen over here. This isn't Mortal Kombat.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, well, we already know. But you can actually there's a possibility of you being able to pair Josh Allen with like Jaden Daniels, and that's super exciting because
where do you think Jaden Daniels will be though?
he could be at the end of the third. Sorry, the top of the third. He's going ADP right now is
He's gonna
QB
be.
11.
That feels
He's gonna.
high. That
Yeah,
feels high for him.
yeah. For me,
Yeah,
he's gonna go. I feel like he's gonna go later than that.
Yeah, that feels high for him.
I think I'm looking over our draft
Let's
from last
bookmark this
year,
and come back in a few weeks, okay?
and I think there was only one person who went QB in the first two rounds, and I think that was Marco.
It's
And
Marco
he took
Jackson Fields.
Lamar
So that
Jackson fifth, and then coming back he took Fields,
so that's
which
it didn't help him. He was
yeah,
he
but
was last, right? And
Fields
when I went
Fields, but Fields was hurt. Like we have to understand. Like Fields was hurt, had an off year fantasy wise, and Lamar Jackson, yes, he won the MVP, but fantasy wise didn't have his greatest season to the potential of where he was
but
drafted.
exactly. So that's exactly. So I feel like if you miss on Hero QB, you're screwed. And
Yes, you've
I missed
yes, yes,
when I did excuse me, heavy QB. When I did heavy QB, Herbert and Brady. I don't remember Herbert's year exactly, but I remember very well Brady's year, and that was the year where it was like
done
2021 Big Ben.
when he was done.
Yeah, he was. It was when just like when Big Ben was done the year before.
Done, yeah,
It was
done.
just dink and dunk, right? And it floored me. I was ninth that year. I think Marco finished 10th that year. We both had Devontae Adams, surprisingly. Actually, the rest of his roster was pretty good, but I think like Kenneth Walker kind of sometimes in the sixth round I think he was splitting carries with Rashad Penny, and your second running back is Alexander Madison.
So
It
I think
becomes
what
tough
we're
after,
saying,
but man,
That's
it
tough.
becomes really tough after. If you don't hit on heavy QB, you get really screwed with the rest of your roster.
so I think what we're saying is that for all of our listeners here that partake in the Bush League fantasy season, please go heavy QB. All of our other listeners, please continue to tune in.
Even go hero QB, take QB in the first round.
Great segue.
Do it.
Great segue there, Raj. So our second strategy on the board here is going to be the hero QB. So this basically, again, the strategy would be drafting a QB in round one. So likely with the first, I guess, 5 to 6 slots, and then waiting into the later rounds to draft your second while stocking up on running back, wide receiver, tight end. Um, and then look, you'll likely change your strategy again depending on how many QBs go off the board and what's left, especially if you're picking early, like top three. You'll have to monitor that depending on if you pick up your second one in round 5, round 6, round 7. It's really going to depend on how the draft is falling. So some examples of the strategy would be drafting like a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts, a Lamar Jackson, and then potentially getting later on like an Aaron Rodgers or a Deshaun Watson, Geno Smith, um, in tier 4, basically. Um, but obviously acting accordingly to that. So I had this strategy basically last year, but with this strategy,
Holy my!
you
Just look
need
at who
to
you
hit.
drafted last year. What the hell?
Yeah.
That's wild.
So last year I had the third pick overall, and I had the draft fell Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and then I took Josh Allen, and then on the turn I took CD Lamb. So basically doing that really solidified my they've both finished number one at their positions, so it helped solidify both of those slots with the best player. um, it's just all about hitting, right? Like if you don't hit before you wait for your second, my second QB, I don't remember when I took him last year, but it was Kenny Pickett, and I took him really late. um I want to say sixth round before I got to Pickett, sixth or seventh round before I got
You picked him in the 7th round.
seventh round. So
And you
that
probably
was when I
still picked
picked.
him
So that
too
was the
early.
hero strategy. That way he made it look like he was John Elway in the preseason, 5 drives, 5 touchdowns, and I got a little excited and waited on QB. Thought I was being smart over everyone. I mean, I guess I was because I won the league. But no, that definitely hurt because I was looking for that QB2. So that would have been a time where I would have, should have maybe acted accordingly and changed my strategy. But Fab, what do you think of this strategy instead?
I actually did this on Sunday. So I was drafting fifth in a 10-team SuperFlex league that I'm in there with Roger and some of our guests that were on the pod. So like Camilo, for example, he's also excuse me, he's also in the league as well. And I was drafting fifth, and I went hero QB. I drafted Jalen Hurts in fifth overall in the first round, and then I just started solidifying the rest of my positions. I went Jonathan Taylor in the in the second round. I went Puka in the third.
Puka went in the third.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Puka went in the third. He went a little bit late, so I saw some value there, so I picked him up. Devante in the fourth, he was there too, and I didn't like the other running backs that were still like hovering around in that area. So that goes back to what we were saying before, right? You kind of want
What
to
was
pick out,
sorry? What was your
yeah,
slot?
fifth,
Oh, fifth. Okay.
yeah. Which, by the way, drafting fifth for me, favorite spot to draft. 4, 5, 6 in a 10-team league, favorite spot to
How
draft.
come?
You're always. I feel like, and this is gonna sound stupid, but like I feel like you have the shortest amount of time to wait between picks, because you're only really waiting like about 10 spots versus if you're drafting first, you're
Yeah,
waiting
yeah,
like
yeah.
20
That makes
spots,
sense.
right?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot
So
of
you're
sense.
always really you might not necessarily be getting the very best player, but you always have a selection of high quality players. At least I find whenever I drafted those spots. And statistically speaking, and this is not me talking, the majority of fantasy championships have come from the 4, 5, 6, 7 spots. I guess. I guess that stat doesn't count me. That's fine. Well, here's to hoping. But I typically like drafting around the 4, 5, 6 spot. So yeah, I think I don't know. Obviously, I think I drafted very well.
No, I'm joking. It was a good, like, looking back at it. You got Kenneth Walker in the 6th round, which I think he's going to
That
have
was
a
a
Wow.
nice year.
steal. That was a
Evan Ingram
steal.
in the 8th.
Yeah, that was
Wow.
another
And
steal too. Again, it's
yeah,
you're looking at a
Yeah, I
good
don't know.
value,
I
good
don't know who you
spots.
guys were drafting with, but like I don't know if they were
it's
doing something else
it's because
or
four bench spots. That's why.
Yeah.
yeah, but still, you guys shared your teams, and it was like
Well,
really.
to be fair, everyone's team is pretty stacked. No one's team looks like, oh, this is a horrible team. Everyone's team looks pretty stacked. And if you go according to the Yahoo draft grades, Roger and I had the worst grade. So there's also that to look into as
Yeah,
well.
but
I don't know
Yahoo
which
Roger
one to put
Yahoo
stock in.
Yahoo has
Roger didn't draft a kicker or a defense, so that means
that's another great strategy.
He's a horrible
that
drafter.
means his you won't count those numbers, right? So
Another great
he's already what
guys.
screwed on technically 2 weeks for buys.
Why do you need to draft a
Actually, every
kicker?
week.
Why do you need to draft a kicker?
I just want to know who you're
I
going to
don't
draft. I want to
understand.
know who you're going to drop week one to pick
We'll
up a kicker
see.
and a
You know
defense.
what I'm going to do? What I always do. I'm going to wait and see how the week
Yeah,
goes. I'm going to see if I
pivot? Can we
I'm going to see
pivot
if
for
I
a second to
blow out my
Rogers
opponent.
strategy on weekly lineups, or do you want to wait till next week to do that segment? Because it's a fantastic
We could do it now.
little segment.
We could do it now. It's up to you, Nak. You're running the show today.
Go for it. No,
Yeah,
this is for everyone
yeah.
who's listening is not understanding right now. It's Roger likes to go without a kicker weekly on his team basically. And here, I'll let you kind of
Yeah.
explain how that works.
So I will have a defense once week one starts.
At some
That's
point.
at some point. But defense is also random. Like you could stream defenses. But anyways, what I do
I
is
agree.
I
I
start.
agree with streaming defenses more than kickers. I'll say that.
I
That makes
agree
no
the
sense.
opposite.
That
I
makes
agree
even
the
less
opposite.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
agree
agree
with
the
streaming
opposite of
defenses
Yeah,
that.
more than
that
kickers.
makes even less sense.
100%.
But basically, I start the week without a kicker. I see how my matchup goes. If it looks like I'm either going to likely, if it looks like I'm going to get blown out and lose, I don't add a kicker. I'm winning and it looks like it might be a close matchup, then I see who I could drop, who I like the least in my bench, and I drop them and I pick up a kicker. If it looks like I'm going to blow out the opponent, amazing. I don't need to pick up a kicker. I could keep that depth on my bench. And I didn't win last year. I lost to NAC, but I was in second place, so it does work somewhat.
And
You do. There was a time when I was playing Nick, and I think I was gonna end, like it was getting close, and the last kicker that was available to be picked up for the 4 p.m. games ended up being picked up. Thankfully, I won, but that's the risk you do play with if you use that type of strategy.
And Roger also hopes that one of his bench players is out that week, so he could put him into his IR spot, and then yes, pick up the kicker
Yeah,
without
I do that
dropping.
sometimes.
Yeah, no, you do
I,
that all the time.
I do.
He just hopes for an injury on his bench. Just a 1 game injury. I don't need you this week. Okay, just
It's like, okay,
go
he
on
missed
IR.
practice. Good, good,
Guys,
good.
Yeah, good. He missed
I love doing
practice.
this. I love doing
Yeah,
this. But
yeah.
the like QB, I think that's what most people do in SuperFlex 2QBs is pick the QB on the first round. Like that's not what I did in the draft that Fab and I were talking about. I went well, anyways, we're gonna talk about late QB, but I feel like most people that's what they do. Like it's QB first round and then kind of figure out
Yeah,
your
it's
second QB in the third, fourth, whatever
look,
round it is.
strategies, and experts every time you're in a super flex or a 2QB league, like it's just important to get that guy. Now, again, what we were saying, if it's not in the first 4 or 5 picks, I think you can make an argument where it's like, okay, the QB strategy is not for me, especially not the hero QB strategy, because you're technically not getting a top 5 guy, let's say, and then on the turn you might not even get a top 10 guy. So
Yeah,
at that point, what's the point of going hero QB? I think the only way I go hero QB is if everyone bypassed the QB in the first round and I'm picking at 10. Well, no, then I'll give me Josh Allen and Mahomes, and salut la visit. Thank you very much, everybody, for letting me win the league. But other than that, this is one of my favorite strategies: is the hero QB. You get your guy, and then you fill up your roster with a lot of talent, and then hopefully grab, like you said, maybe you sneak an Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins later on in the draft as your second QB.
I got him in round 7. Aaron
Rogers.
Rodgers. Yeah, like I thought that was a steal. He was there for me
Superflex, or
around
is
Are
it
you
7.
or is
wearing
it
are you wearing
QB?
your chaplet every game he has, just and praying for his
Who?
ACL to stay
But
intact?
His
his
His ACL is
ACL,
his
his
Achilles. Sorry, his
Achilles.
Achilles.
his Achilles is perfectly healed now. Okay, like it
What about his
was.
other one?
Yeah, exactly. Isn't there something about like the
Yeah,
imbalance?
they were saying that. I was reading
It's
something
not going to
about it.
apply
And
to
I got
Aaron
I got
Rodgers.
a
It's
little
not going to apply to
nervous
Aaron Rodgers.
reading that for him.
None
Right.
of
I don't
these
think he's running. I don't think he's going to be
conspiracy
running
theories
around. I
apply to
think the
Aaron
ball's going to
Rodgers,
come
guys.
quick and like it
He
depends.
wasn't.
Is it the plant foot? Is it the
He didn't
plant
get
foot?
hurt. He didn't get hurt running around. He just got hurt
Ye-
because this guy he was
Yeah.
missed his block. And I just what's
Point.
weird is that the NFL is cruel and put him on Monday night again, like
Yeah,
last
against
game
the
of the
Niners.
week again
Against the same
at
pass
at
rusher that
Yeah,
got
yes,
him
with the
down.
Niners.
yeah.
With
Yeah,
the
it's
yeah.
very, very cruel NFL. Like,
Did they have who's their left tackle that they signed, or that have not signed yet? That they traded? Was it Lane Johnson?
No,
no,
Lane is still with the
no,
Eagles.
it's Philly.
Who am I
It's
thinking
Trent
about?
Williams.
Trent Williams? No, who am I thinking about? The left tackle for the Jets.
Oh, the Jets.
Yes, that they traded for, and then he hasn't reported to camp or whatever. I'm gonna get the
That's
name.
Hassan Reddick, but he's not left tackle.
He's a linebacker.
Okay, so forget saying.
Yeah, I think it's good that you you turn off your camera there.
I mean, technical.
Moving right along. So again, guys, this is pretty much. I think
Tyron Smith.
the hero.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Fab. Yeah, Tyron
there we
Smith.
go.
Yeah.
There we go.
He's always injured.
The hero QB, I think, is really the more popular strategy in 2QB leagues. I think it's utilized the most. But then that leads us into our third and final strategy here. This is the late QB, so this one kind of speaks for itself. You stock up on running backs, wide receivers, tight end or two while drafting, well, waiting to draft a QB. So you'd wait at least until round 5 or 6 before drafting your first QB, and then you would probably take your second a round or two later, just to make sure you've got decent amount of QBs, at least a decent two QBs,
Mhm.
let's say, because it's going to really start to get thin as the draft moves along. But again, the number of QBs is going to dictate how long you wait before selecting your first one, right? If you again, I understand what Fab was saying before. When there's a run on a certain position, you kind of shy away from it. But in this, in the late QB, you guys kind of really have to pay attention to the QBs sliding off the board, because you really don't want to get stuck with, maybe Deshaun Watson as your QB1. Um, Not if you're Fab, anyways.
Or even
But
QB
if
two.
In the
He's
same
not on my
room.
Because
roster.
it's
He's
going to
not on my
depend on
roster.
when people start. If a lot of people are gonna have two QBs before you've even selected one, right? So you're just gonna want to watch the board. You may have to grab them before being stuck with, like I said, a Will Levis or Daniel Jones, Bryce Young as your QB1. Like,
Oh my God.
you're not going far with these guys. So I mean, examples of the strategy would be like drafting like a Jefferson first, then a Gibbs in round 2, maybe a Henry round 3, Waddle round 4 type deal. Like, that would be a pretty good strategy. You have a pretty good, you have a solid wide receiver and running back cupboard there, and then you could kind of gauge where the board is falling. Like, do I draft one in round 5, or can I go one more until I grab my QB? Raj, I think this is the staple for you.
Yeah. So last year in our Bush League pool, fantasy pool, I had Goff in the 6th round. I had Carr in the 7th, and I hit on CJ Stroud in the 11th. So, like, I think I got lucky there. Like, there's no way. Like, I picked up Carr thinking he was giving me my QB2, and it ended up being Stroud. He finished QB 13, but he really picked it up in the second half of the year, right? So, the way I see this strategy is, like, look, Josh Allen, 473 points. Hurts had 435 points. This is all last year. Dak Prescott, 406. And it goes back to what I said earlier, where after that, everyone's bunched up into like a 20 to 30 point difference. So, Nak, like, your point of like my guy, I agree with you. If it's for me, it's Josh Allen. If I have the first overall pick, I am taking Josh Allen. Outside of that pick, I don't want a QB until I'm gonna wait a bit, and that's what I did again with the draft that me and Fab were in this past Sunday. I went Tyreek Hill. Was lucky enough to get Justin Jefferson in the 2nd round.
It's
So
ridiculous.
the way I would work with the late QB is you kind of have to have like a range of QBs that you say to yourself, I have to come up with these 4 to 5 QBs if I'm going to do late QB, non-negotiable. So it goes back again to not being stuck to the strategy. You could say, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to wait on QB as much as I can. But in the draft that Fab and I did on Sunday, I said, you know what? Jordan Love is available. I'm going to take him in the 3rd round. Typically, I would have probably waited a bit longer. But to me, Jordan Love is at that cusp of elite QB territory. He had 384 fantasy points last year, 7 less than
And he
Lamar
started
Jackson.
and he started
Ex-
very poorly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like Lamar Jackson, who, was he the MVP or not? He's going top 3 in a lot of drafts. And we know how it is with Lamar. Fantastic runner. Derrick Henry's there though. The weapons are meh.
He lost weight
He lost weight. Maybe he's going to be faster. Who knows? But
or
he,
injured.
he's never hitting that like 30, 40 passing touchdowns. And with Derrick Henry there, I think there could be some regression. So uh, I'm gonna like in our draft this Sunday. I'm most likely gonna go wide receiver again. Like, if I look at it, like CeeDee Lamb had 405 points last year. He had more points than every QB except the top 3 that I just mentioned: Prescott,
Yeah, it
Hurts,
was it
and
was very
Allen.
fun. It was
It
very
Yeah.
fun.
was
It's like
yeah,
I had.
and
It's like he was my second
you
QB.
destroyed,
Realistically,
and that 40 burger destroyed me, right? We've been talking about a lot about the wide receivers, but then there's also, like, you could also pick the running back. Last year, I went Christian McCaffrey with the first overall pick, and he was absolutely amazing. 395 yards. Excuse me, 395 points. But I'm a bit wary of him this year, and we talked about it a little bit. Yeah, last year I think Nak, you agree. Last week, Nak, I think you agree with me where I just don't think he's getting the same volume he's getting. And if he does, the calf worries me. And I think it could lead to injury. And so if I'm going to take a running back that high, it'd be Brees or Bijan. But I think Jonathan Taylor can probably be had in the second round. I think Saquon Barkley could probably still be there in the second round, again, depending on how the draft flows. So for me, like the late QB, or at least coming into it, I'm thinking late QB. I'm thinking wide receiver, running back, at least, and then I'll go from there based off what the range of QBs that I want to have. But what petrifies me the most, and I said it in our group chat, guys, having Olave, Nico Collins, as much as I like him, DK Metcalf, having those guys as WR1s absolutely petrifies me. Like I don't want those guys as WR1s. I'm sorry, can't do it. Can't win with him.
I mean, I tend to agree with everything you kind of just laid out there. Like it makes sense, right? It's again, it's each strategy is going to depend where you are picking in the draft, right? Like that's what it's going to come down to, and then it's going to come down to what picks are selected. Fab, I know not you don't like this strategy too much, but I'm sure you have a nice take on it.
I actually used to do this strategy quite a bit in the beginning when we first started off with 2QBs, just because I wasn't really familiar with it. And this was talking about like years ago. So I would always go running back heavy and wide receiver heavy. But I think this strategy has a lot more pull in full PPR leagues. Like to your guys' point about, like with the CD Lamb outscoring everybody except for the top three quarterbacks. If you end up with two top wide receivers in the first two rounds, I think Guido had that last year, and he started off like really well as well. Like his team was just super stacked in the beginning. He had Justin Jefferson, and I think Tyreek Hill to start off the season, which is nuts. If you start off in that scenario, it's hard for you to shy away from that because the quarterbacks later on, like I wouldn't also go like past round 5 without getting a quarterback. I think that's where I would get uncomfortable. And you can start to tier your guys like the lower end, like the mid QB2s, like the Tuas of the world, the Trevor Lawrences of the world, and all those guys, like even Jared Goff. Like Jared Goff is great, don't get me wrong, but the rushing upside is going to cap his ceiling quite a bit. Same thing with Tua. And you can still have a very solid team with, like those guys rounding out your QB room. And then with that, you would have solid power players and like in all the other skill positions that we just mentioned before. So actually, I don't hate this strategy. Actually, it depending on where you're drafting and how the draft falls to you, this strategy can actually be super beneficial to you. I mean, Raj, you hit on CJ Stroud for sure later on in the draft, right? But there's something to be said about how you can't necessarily win your draft in the first few rounds, but you can definitely lose it. But you're going to win your draft with your later picks. So hitting on guys like CJ Stroud in the later rounds, hitting on guys like if not when you drafted CD Lamb so late last year, late considering where he's going right now. It's something to be said about how the later picks affect your draft more, I think. And with the late QB strategy, you can find those quarterbacks that people are not necessarily looking at that can provide you that extra. They just push you over the edge, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this guy's a stack wide receiver core, is a stack running back core, and his quarterbacks are actually performing at a decent rate. They're putting up 20 points, 22 points a game, nothing crazy, but enough to sustain a serious fantasy season. So this late QB strategy, draft strategy to me, it depends on where I'm drafting, but it's definitely up there as a possibility.
I'm curious, guys. Like, who's the running back that you'd both be most comfortable drafting, like as late as possible, to be your RB1?
Oh, that's a good question.
Derrick Henry.
I think I had. Oh, that's a
Derrick
high one.
Henry.
Yep.
So that's probably hero QB strategy.
Yeah.
Honestly, like end of tier 3 would be like a Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, that's
I
same
think
for me.
I think I'm there with like I'd like one of those. Like I'm not gonna base my whole draft on it, but that would be my aim. Like if everyone's gone and it comes to me and like these two are left, like I need to grab one
So
to
I
be an
find
RB1.
I
Oh,
find that's
even
a
Isaiah
good.
Pacheco, actually. Hold
Yeah,
on a second.
yes, that's a
Isaiah
good one.
Pacheco is
So
somebody that I would not have an issue with leaving my draft as my RB1.
I think similar to like how you find your ranges for QB, like
Yeah,
you
but
kind of figure
he's in the RB1.
he's in the RB.
Pacheco.
Yeah, like in some of
He's
the
ninth.
At the
He's
very
ninth
end of it,
overall.
though.
yeah,
At the very like his
Yeah, he's
ADP is
ninth.
like
Ninth.
is 11th from what I see here.
like
I have nine, but it probably
Okay,
just
so
varies from
whatever.
what we're
So split
looking
the
at.
difference
Doesn't
then.
matter
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah, like kind of that's the thing. Whereas I'm gravitating closer to what Knack has been saying about running backs lately, where this year feels like there's a lot of like if I look at David Montgomery, James Conner was fantastic last year, right? He's always injury prone, but
Look at the top
even
20. Just look at the
yeah,
top 20.
Yeah,
There's a
top 20 are
lot of
nice.
depth there. Besides
yeah,
the
Yeah.
top 3 or maybe 4.
Yeah.
And you know what? You know what just came out today too? Kyron Williams is returning punts for the Rams.
I saw that.
Like,
so
I do
he
That
not
makes
want
me not
Kyron
want to
Williams
draft
no,
him.
and
anywhere
No.
near my team
but guys, he
because
even said
it's just injury.
he even said that, and I'm not quoting word for word, but there was reports that were saying how he even knows himself that he needs to kind of give the workload to another running back to stay more fresh. He's been apparently that's been floating around camp within the Rams.
So why is he
Whereas,
Yeah,
returning
he's injury
punts?
prone. Like
yeah, he's injury prone.
he's injury prone,
Yeah,
right? That's where, like, you know, like your zero RB strategy, you keep going down and you grab a guy like Quorum, like later on, like that guy might lead the backfield at one point. Especially now he's returning punts too. I don't know. The workload, like you
I
said,
don't
just
understand that
comes
strategy
down a
though.
little bit.
with
I
the
don't get
Rams.
that. Yeah, like I don't see what the like. I guess that's why I'm not a head coach. But like, I don't get why you would put your RB1 to be returning punts when
I guess they
he's
don't have a
injured.
dynamic player to return
I
kicks.
guess, yeah. And
I think
that's the
I
only.
think the Rams are realizing that, and Sean McVay has done it. Like he jettisoned, like remember Sony Michelle, and then there was Cam Akers and all these guys. Like they know how to find running backs. But like for me, maybe just going back to the late QB strategy, like in the draft we had on Sunday, I was lucky enough to get Tyreek and Justin Jefferson. But in my head, I wanted Tyreek, and then I was hoping for Jonathan Taylor. I think Fab, you took him, but in my head, I was hoping to go wide receiver, running back. But just when you see Justin Jefferson there in the second round,
No, you can't.
impossible not to
And
take.
But
not
you,
for nothing, would when Guido did it last year, if Jefferson would have stayed healthy all year, like he probably would have
Unbelievable
won the
season.
league.
Yeah,
Like he
hundred
probably would
percent.
have won the league
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Tyreek there too. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
he
yeah,
got drafted Mostert late with all those. They had 20 touchdowns or whatever it
yeah.
was. Like he probably would have won the league because he was going to put up 25 to 30 points with those wide receivers every single week. So 60 points, 50 to 60 points every week with two players, like always, you know? You can't pass it up. Like as much
No,
as like you said, you want to solidify another position, but at the end of the day, you have to go with value, right? Like you can't just say, oh, okay, I'm gonna take Jonathan Taylor. But you know what? Like if Justin Jefferson stays healthy, he's gonna get more points than a Jonathan Taylor, right? So at the end of the day, you go points and value, and the value was there.
guys, I just want to ask the same question that I asked about running backs, but for QB. So I think it'd be helpful for listeners to kind of like gauge like from the strategy perspective, like what's the kind of risk they want to take with regards to the QBs. Like, what's the worst QB you guys would take to be your QB1?
Maybe Matt Stafford, Justin
yeah.
Herbert,
Oh,
Stafford, but that could be
yeah.
low. I was looking at Goff kind of as
No,
my safe keep
yeah.
my QB1, but then like Lawrence, Cousins, Herbert, Stafford, like that falls under after Goff. I'd be a little bit more worried. I'd have to go. I'd 100% if it passed Goff and I didn't get a QB yet. I would definitely have to go QB my next two
Mm-hmm.
picks hands down
QB,
because then
QB,
you're
QB. Like you got to go QB three
And
rounds in a row.
would you just
maybe
go
not
home? Would you just go
three.
home
Yeah.
run there, Matt Knack? Like, okay, you don't get Stafford, you don't get Goff. Would you go home run with Daniels, or are you going maybe safer with like Mayfield or
Daniels is going like 11 right now. Daniels 11,
Yeah.
Caleb 14. So when I said Goff, those two guys are already gone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those the Daniels and the Caleb. So technically within the ADPs, those two guys are gone
yeah?
already.
Yeah.
Who is it for you, Fab?
I don't disagree with Knack there. I'm not Trevor Lawrence being my QB1 would give me some pause. But Stafford and Goff, I'm okay with. I think that's the furthest I will go down. Herbert too, I'm okay with that. But I
Herbert
wouldn't go.
less now that I'm thinking about it.
but like I if Geno Smith is my QB1, that's where I get really panicky.
You were all in on him last week.
I'm all in on him to do better than his ADP of 22 or whatever it is, but like I'm still not all in on him to be my QB1. If he's my QB1, it's because I haven't drafted a QB in like 9 rounds. The rest of my team better be stacked.
Yeah, that's the problem. But the other thing is it's you're honestly throwing darts at a board at some point. Like everyone has to realize, like there's 66 QBs that played last year, right? So like there is strategy for drafting maybe four of them, or drafting the backup to your guy. Like to be completely safe. Like again, this late QB strategy, your team should be stacked with at the wide receiver and running back position. You're gonna have primo players at that position when you're drafted. Maybe an elite tight end. Who knows? Like maybe if you go somewhere along the lines of Justin Jefferson, then like a Jonathan Taylor, and then somehow like Laporta is there to at the turn 3, you grab him, and then you take someone like I don't know, Devonta Smith or something in the fourth. Like your draft is looking really really good heading into drafting a QB. So you're yes, it's scary to wait too long, but if your other positions are solidified, you're not banking on QB. So whereas in the hero QB strategy, you're really banking that QB is getting you minimum 20 to 25 points a week, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
everything else is bonus. So if the guy
Exactly.
is not a bona fide 20 to 25 point, there's no point in doing it.
yeah.
And then you're okay with going a step down in your other positions because that guy's picking up the slack. And that's what kind of happened with me last year again with Josh Allen. There was, 2, 3 games where he had 40 points, so it helped that my second QB, even when he was getting 12 points, it didn't matter. With my two QBs combined, I was getting, 52 sometimes, some weeks. So you're still under that 25-25.
So to play off that, then, if you guys are drafting Anthony Richardson in the first round, are you looking to grab a quarterback by like by the third round in the event that
That's such a
the
good
whole
question.
injury prone and all that stuff and everything? Because he would be prototypical hero QB. That guy's supposed to be getting you 25 points a week. In the very small body of work that we've seen last year, he's done that. But
Mm-hmm.
we also know that the way he plays opens up the injury concern quite a bit. So like if you're there at like let's say 6 or 7 spot, which is a realistic spot where you can be getting Anthony Richardson, are you going to be waiting that much longer to get a second QB?
You know,
Um,
it's a good question. It is a good
so
question.
go, go ahead.
I don't think he falls into hero QB just yet because of the body of work is missing. But yes, to
He's
answer
going
your
first
question,
round. He's
Yeah.
going first round in a lot of mocks
he's
that I've
going
done.
down now. They
All
have
three of
I
us were
don't know
like super. We're hyping him up like 3
I don't
weeks
know
ago.
how. I know I goes week in and week out, but like then when you hear like Joe Flacco's outperforming you, and man, that preseason game, he had a good play, and then he had like that ugly pick six that he threw. It was terrible. And now you have CJ Stroud moving ahead of him in fantasy rankings. With that, I don't agree with
No,
because
I don't agree with
like
that either.
Stroud doesn't run, and man, when Mike was
He
on the
doesn't.
pod, he was saying like he needs, in order to get that value out of him, he needs 42 to 4,500 yards and easily 30 to 35
He needs to be
touchdowns,
Dak
which is
Prescott.
which is a
Yeah.
lot,
He needs to be
man.
Dak
In
Prescott.
year two, where there could be regression. But Raj, I want to know what you think.
So yeah, there's different strategies with that. Like you can take like an Anthony Richardson. Personally, if I take Anthony Richardson that high, I'm taking a safe. I'm probably taking 2 safe pocket passers
Right.
afterwards because A, I know that they're not going to get injured, and B, Anthony Richardson's ability to be a pocket passer is a bit iffy. And that's where also like your scoring really matters in terms of your draft strategy too. I believe Bush League guys were at 5 points per
Yeah.
TD, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like
Passing touchdown.
that matters.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's 6 points, then maybe you favor more the
Pockets.
pocket passers. If it's a bit less, then maybe you favor more the rushing. Us we're at 5, so like Anthony Richardson again, TBD on how he is as a pocket passer. TBD if he's gonna run. Like they're saying all the right things, like oh he's gonna keep running, but who knows? And then the injury concern, I'm protecting him with like 2 pocket passers just in case he goes down with injury.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that would be the way to go.
Yeah, I don't think I have to worry too
Like,
much. Like I don't see him coming back down
if you're
to
leaving
me.
your
So
draft with like Anthony Richardson and like Jaden Daniels,
I'm not drafting him. I'm not drafting him. Like as I have him ranked high in our ranks, but I'm
and Jaden Daniels,
no Richardson. I'm not like
I
and
mean, he's
I don't want to pay the
I don't
price
want
for
him as a
him.
QB1
if he's
personally.
there for
It's the
me in the
price.
second round by some weird chance, if he's there for me in the second round, it's gonna come down to one of those situations where it's like I have to take him. I cannot pass him up because
Dude, if
I'm
dude
drafting
Fab,
sixth, I think. Like if
if he
he's
gets
there,
injured, your season is done.
oh,
done.
I know
Yeah.
Your
that,
season is done, done,
but
done, done,
who's to
done.
say he's gonna get injured?
Unless you drop your fab pants
Everyone
and
can get injured at any single
FAAB
day.
pants,
Like
not your own pants, but you drop the pants of your fab
that's
budget and
that's
you
the
blow
late night.
everything
That's a
on
late night
Flacco.
episode, Mac. That's a late night episode,
You drop everything on Flacco.
right? That's
$50 on Flacco.
for that episode. I
You'd be
really got to turn
flaccid.
off the camera.
Guys, quickly, after the cuts, after training camp, after all of our previews, you guys have a riser or a faller in drafts? Anyone who's dropping in your ranks, or anyone who's climbing them up? Raj?
Okay, I have three, and I'll go quick.
Wow.
Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix could be an interesting one because he's
Agree.
going to run. He's going to
I
run a
agree.
lot.
Agree.
JSN, low sample size, but he played a lot into wide receiver sets during preseason. I think Tyler Lockett is injured, and Brian Thomas. It seemed like he was getting a lot of snaps with the ones during camp. So I think
That's an interesting one, I think.
I like Brian
and
I'm
Thomas
look
a
interested to
lot.
see that.
and
Yeah.
look Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, two very good players. Him and Gabe Davis do the same thing. And I think Brian Thomas eventually, or right now, is just can be a better Gabe Davis. He's going to be faster, bigger. We've seen what Gabe Davis is. He's just a deep yardage guy, a deep target. So those would be my three.
Yeah,
Fab?
I was the same with JSN and also Brian Thomas. So I'm just going to go a little bit more plain vanilla here. I'm going to just go with the rookie wide receivers actually because they really impressed me during camp and even during preseason. So not just Malik Neighbors, obviously. For me, he was more of at the beginning of the season. Just because I know what to expect, he was more of a wide receiver, potentially 3. I think you can actually say he's going to be wide receiver 2. The projection for him is pretty high, and the guy's been looking great. Roma Dunze seems to be getting a connection going on with Caleb Williams, and I wouldn't be concerned to draft him as like my wide receiver 4 with the 3 upside. Will he be a weekly starter for me? Ideally not, but then again, if he's there as my wide receiver 3, I also wouldn't be too concerned. But I'm very high on Brian Thomas Jr. and also Rasheed Rice now is just like ever since the confirmation that he's not going to be suspended. Like I feel like he's going way too low in drafts. He's going.
I agree.
Like everyone's forgetting about him, and he's there. He's going to give you solid weekly wide receiver 2 numbers. Yeah, Xavier Worthy is there, and Hollywood Brown is there for sure, but he definitely has already that existing rapport with Mahomes, and Mahomes throws to the guys that he trusts. And they had that wide receiver experiment for the last few years now where they just were drafting wide receivers in the second round and it wasn't panning out with Sky Moore and whoever else. It seems like they finally got their guy with Rasheed Rice, so he is definitely rising up in my ADP.
Juju Smith-Schuster to the moon because he was just signed.
Yeah.
Well, they need depth, right?
I don't even think he's starting the year. I think
They
he's
need someone to ride their bikes. That way they don't get flat tires or
His
whatever
knee
it
is
is.
blown out.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
just Fab on the Dunes.
I just want to with your Juju. They caught him in a New England interview. I saw a picture of it today. He was wearing like a practice jersey, and underneath the New England practice jersey, he was wearing a KC logo. Like a few weeks back. like what the heck is that?
Come on, bro.
Just on a Dunze Fab. I'm really high on DJ Moore, and I think Keenan will have a nice year too. But for sure, if Adunze has a big year, you have to assume like one of Moore or Allen don't live up to their billing.
Yeah, like I don't.
There's no way all three of them could eat.
I'm not
really high
pushing
on
him to
DJ
get
Moore this
1,000
year.
I
yards
love
because
him.
any team that has 3 bona fide wide receivers and all 3 of them get 1,000 yards receiving is I don't think it's happened like in the last like 20 years or something. There's a stat for that, like it's extremely rare. So I don't see Odunze getting like that high, like breaking the 1,000-yard mark, but I still think he's going to have a very, very solid rookie season, like somewhere within the 800 yards vicinity.
I think it's going to be hard to produce at that offense with him, with what's around him, and they're probably going to want to run a fair share too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
DJ Moore consistently gets drafted after Nico Collins and Mike Evans.
Yeah, it's criminal,
It
man.
makes no
criminal.
sense. He's so good.
Put some respect on my name.
He's so good.
I'll quickly give you a couple here. I had mentioned Marshawn Lloyd at the beginning of the pod.
Yep.
He's rising up draft boards for sure, especially with Dylan injured. A guy was probably dropping a little bit more. Not that he was really high, but in 2QB, it could matter. Is Jacoby Brissett. A little bit of a shoulder injury. Drake May has looked really good, so he's. I think he's going up a little bit more on some boards. I still don't want to see him start because that offensive line is a complete mess, and he might die. So I don't want to see him too much. But I also like Will Levis. Been hearing a lot of good stuff with Will Levis in second season. So I think he's rising a little bit in my draft boards. Like I'm okay if I have to get him as a QB2 or potential QB3 with upside. He's probably a low end QB2 QB3 in the league. So. Well, guys, that about wraps it up for this week's episode on our draft strategies, 2QB draft strategies. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything that you want to hear us talk about or explain in further detail, please let us know. Hit us up on social media on any of our social medias. Don't forget to subscribe to the Survivor Pool. We will be posting more info about that, and follow us all over the place. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Peace out.
Bye, everyone.